Okay, hi, my name is Adrienne Brandenburg. This presentation is called Prioritizing Free Choice Reading in a Heritage Classroom. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I am from Fort Collins, Colorado. This is my Twitter handle. Feel free to reach out to me there if you would like to get in touch with me or have some feedback or questions. And then my blog is linked here, and there's also a contact form on my blog, Adventures in Heritage Teaching. So thanks for being here. I'm glad to be here with all of you. Let me see if I can advance my slides here. All right. So let's see. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that I am on the unceded ancestral lands of the Arapaho, Ute, Tshistas, and Osheti-Shakoween tribal nations. I recognize that many indigenous members of these and other nations reside here, despite settler colonialism and white supremacy. I want to thank them for being ongoing good stewards of our land, and I commit into their land, and I commit to advocating for the sovereignty of these tribal nations and for indigenous teachers, students, and members of our community. And in my own work, I vow to both recognize and seek out their contributions, center and amplify their voices, and intentionally work against systems that seek to erase and exclude them and their histories. Going to just do a quick privilege check. This is something I learned from Abelardo Almazan. I just want to start this presentation by admitting and just acknowledging that I am a white woman. I am not Latinx. I am cisgendered, heterosexual, able-bodied, Spanish speaker. English is my first language. I grew up in a middle-class family. I am financially independent, and I have postgraduate degrees. And so I just want to acknowledge that that is the lens with which I walk into this work of teaching heritage speakers, which is always kind of a challenge as a white person. And I feel like I'm always trying to walk this line. So I'm just here to share with you some things that have worked well for me in my class that have really, I think, made a difference in my work with heritage speakers, and hope that that might be helpful for you. I just want to share a quick little bit about my journey with teaching heritage, and FVR is what I'm going to use for free choice reading. It stands for free voluntary reading. So I've been teaching heritage classes since 2012. They had died out at my high school. And so when I came, I had kind of a year to get my bearings. And then the next year I started teaching heritage. I started teaching 9th grade, then we added 10th grade, then we added 11th grade, then we added AP Lit. And our students get college credit for a lot of those classes, free college credit. And this year, I'm actually teaching 9th, 10th, and 11th grade heritage. I have a couple of great colleagues, but so sometimes we switch off or teach different levels. So, so it's been kind of a long journey the last, what is that, 9 years of heritage teaching. And so I just want to share kind of how I got here. I don't want you to think this is what I always thought. And so when I first started teaching heritage, I really was struggling with some of that like white savior trope of like, I will help them and I will give them access to everything and I will teach them to read and I will build their confidence. And, I've come a long way since then. But I think at the beginning I was like, oh, they've never read a book in Spanish. So like, I have to carefully introduce them to books. I have to find a book that's perfect for all of them. We're going to read it together and I'm going to spoon feed it to them and they're going to love it. And it went okay, but like, that's not ideal. Then kind of the next couple of years, I thought, okay, now that they know they can read, now they should be reading. Now we should start doing free choice reading. And then I got, sorry friends. And then I got to the point where I realized like reading is not just a good thing, it's actually like the best thing. And then now, which is where I've kind of gotten to now, it's like, I want them to read all the time, no matter what, from the beginning, from day one, we should be reading. Nothing ever goes away in my class except for like the reading. We do reading every day, no matter what. Okay, so the next question is, what do I mean by free choice reading? And in my classroom, it means like every day for the first 10, sometimes 15 minutes, we read. I have a huge classroom library that they can pick from, and they can read whatever they want. And if they don't see what they want, I try to get it for them, or they look in the library. So to me, that's free choice reading. You get to read whatever you want. We read every day, no matter what. rain or shine, and I do very little accountability. So the first question is, why prioritize free reading? Move this window over here. So here are some of the academic reasons. This is how we re-engage our students with reading. So a lot of my students at least have been disengaged in school for a long time. I think they don't see themselves in the curriculum. They don't feel centered in the class. And for some of them, they're behind in reading. They don't read at grade level. And so they've really started to like disengage and disconnect. So these are some of the reasons. I want to reconnect them with reading and maybe with education. I want to expose my students to a wide variety of vocabulary and registers. I want them to be better writers. So the better readers they are, the better writers they are. And this is how we build literacy skills and reading stamina that transfer to all content areas. And I'd encourage you to read the position statement from the National Council of Teaching of English. If you don't yet see yourself as kind of a language arts teacher, just in Spanish, not English, that was a big turning point for me, is when I started to feel like, okay, I'm a language arts teacher. So what are the language arts teachers doing and what are they prioritizing? So these are the more fun reasons, in my opinion, the more important reasons of why I prioritize free voluntary reading. So teaching students how to read is not the same as teaching them to love to read. This is how we differentiate for students. We find a book that meets them where they're at, what they're interested in, what their reading level is, what they enjoy. It's how I create relationships with kids, is finding out what they like, trying to recommend new books to them. It's how I build some of that rapport. This is how we re-engage our students with reading and education, which is what was on the last slide, and help them overcome some negative relationships with reading. Like, I want them to have a reading life, and they deserve that. They deserve that. This is how we open doors for our students to worlds they don't know. This is how we foster development of empathy and curiosity. This is how we show them mirrors. So if you're familiar with Dr. Sim's work, we want them to see themselves in text. We want them to be validated and affirmed, and reading is one way to do that. And then this is my favorite. I'm going to go to a quote to Dr. Parker on the next slide, but this is how we cultivate their ability to see themselves as deserving of literacy and the freedom that being literate brings. So to me, this is efficacy. This is anti-racist work. This is identity affirming practice. And if you don't know Dr. Kim Parker's work, it's phenomenal. You can follow her on Twitter. I've linked her website here. And this fantastic article that she wrote called Freedom for Literacy. And I want to say this is about literature for Black students, especially Black boys. But I think we can make some parallels to our students in how they're marginalized in school. So she says, we can no longer choose to ignore the multi-literacy Black youth, or in our case, Latinx youth, bring with them into our classrooms. We must leverage their knowledge in ways that support their ongoing literacy development. For far too long, we've simply made choices for young people that were not in their best interests. In this moment, though, we can make a different choice. We can ask Black youth, Latinx youth, what they want to read. We can get those texts into their hands. We can carve out daily dedicated time for that reading to happen. We can choose to be the person working in community with them to reconnect Black youth to the reading lives they deserve. So we can choose to work in community with our students to connect them to the reading lives that they deserve. So I thought that was really awesome. That whole article is amazing. I'd highly recommend it. So let's talk about how we can prioritize free reading. These are kind of the topics I'm going to, these are the topics I'm going to discuss real quick. Hang on one second. I was trying to figure out what was happening. I was hearing voices. All right, so these are the topics I'm going to discuss in the second part of this presentation. How to build your library and keep it fresh, how to set up your room, how to start free reading like on the first day, how to match kids with books, how to have some routines and accountability so that this becomes a sustainable, joyful practice in your classroom, and how to maintain a culture of reading in your classroom. So I always get these questions. So the thing is, you're gonna have to build a classroom library. You can consider using your school library if your school library has a wide range of Spanish language books. most libraries do not. And so you can make that an area of focus. If you prefer to focus on your school library instead of your classroom library, I think that's fine. I like it in my classroom library because I'm trying to, I think students need both, let's put it that way. And also I'm trying to break down all the barriers. So like if a kid doesn't have a book, I don't want to send them to the library. I just want to hand them a book. And so and it's really fun to have a classroom library because it really makes that reading joy and the culture of reading really real. It's everywhere. It's my whole classroom. I'm going to share some photos with you in just a minute. So I think there's a lot of good reasons to build your own library, to get your own library funded so you have books in your own room that stay in your own room. So when you start thinking about these books, and I'll talk about ideas for funding in just a second, when you start thinking about what kind of books you want to get, make sure that you have a lot of different levels. And I should have put age appropriate next, but when we think about the level of reading that most adults do for pleasure reading, you know, we're reading books well below our reading level, and that's enjoyable for us. And so I think it's okay for us to prioritize easy reading for our students. So the trick is you don't want to have anything, it still needs to be age appropriate. So if you teach middle and high school, I'm not going to have kids books in there. I mean, there might be a kid that might want to read one of those, but really I'm looking for stuff that's still chapter books, still graphic novels, things that are interesting to them. I don't want to make them feel like just because they maybe have a lower reading level or they want to read an easier book that they have to sort of sacrifice because of that. I want to make sure to affirm that it's okay that they have that they're choosing an easy book. So I recommend lots of easier books, and I'll share some options. Lots of genres, especially graphic novels, biographies, visual encyclopedias, any of those are really powerful, in addition to your standard like realistic fiction and fantasy books. Ask students what kind of books they like reading, ask them what they're reading in English, ask them what kind of books you should order. I have a colleague of mine sent them to like Amazon and had them add to her Amazon wish list. So find out what they would like to read. If you can, ask other teachers, especially heritage teachers, what books have gone well for them and what have been home runs for them. And I'll share some links in a minute. Ask your librarians or English teachers. I got a lot of English recommendations and then was able to find Spanish versions. And this is a fantastic option, this Lorito books, but it's actually, they have a subscription service where they will curate a box for you every either 6 months or once a school year, where they will send you titles that are high interest adolescent literature in Spanish. So if you can find something where it's curated for you and you don't have to do the hard work of choosing, of finding all the books, that's a good place to start. And I have some lists I can share with you. And I also think it's important that we're considering, you know, this is something I didn't think a lot about the first couple of years when I was developing my library. And I ended up buying a lot of books that unfortunately now I don't have in my library. I had to take out. And so I think it's important as you're building your library, try to be really careful of buying books that are harmful, that have harmful stereotypes, because if the goal is affirming books, like affirming your students' identity and affirming their language practices, we don't want to buy books that aren't doing that. And so thinking about who wrote the book, is it from the culture or about the culture? And a lot of times, friends, this it's more problematic when you're looking for simplified literature. And so you're using, and I have some links in here, but if you're buying some of those like language learner books that are just like higher level, you have to be a little more careful, in my opinion. Does it have a white savior plot? And I've linked a couple of options on here if you that are great like tools to go through books that you may already have. Highly recommend you read books before you buy, or especially before you buy like several copies of a book, just buy one. Also highly recommend you ask around, has anyone read this book? Is it decent? Look at those websites where you can look up like good reviews and kind of see. So make sure that you're being careful. Don't, even if you get funded, you know, it can be hard when you have to spend a lot of money on books. So see if you can save some of it, if you can buy little by little. If you buy for yourself, like if if you buy, you know, a book a month and you want to buy it and read it yourself before it goes in your library, that's a really good option. So just be careful before you buy a bunch of books. For funding, I always get asked, people always want to know about funding. And so my first question is, your school should be funding this library. And so if it's not, let's talk about why. So are they spending money on textbooks? Do you have a textbook? And if not, where did that money go? You know, did they buy readers for English language arts? Do they buy books for the library? If they don't have enough in your library, that's an equity issue. If they buy language reading books for the English classes, but not for the Spanish language arts classes, that's not okay. If they buy textbooks for every other class, your class doesn't have a textbook, why can't you spend that money? And so I think looking around just at your own funding situation and then talking to your admin about this should be equitable. And if anything, my students should get more money for books than those other students. So what's happening here and why don't I have any money for books? I have lots of links here. These are options for Title IV funding. Let's see. A friend of mine speaks, and there's a link here to explain you can often get funding from your school admin for Title IV. Better World Books, a friend of mine, Jen Lopez, her blog is linked at the end. She swears by Better World Books. A public library, you can, another colleague of mine checked out a ton of books from the public library. The only thing is it's checked out to her. And so if the students lost the book, she had to replace it. Donors Choose is a popular option. You know, for me, I started, you know, every time I would buy something silly at Target, I would pick up a book, or at Amazon, I would pick up a book. And so the benefit to funding it yourself is that if you change schools, you get to take the books with you. These are some online options. Revista Literal, these are for language learners, but Revista Literal, Martina Beck's, she basically compiles funny student stories all together and publishes them. She used to publish once a month, so it's just a collection of online reading that might be helpful this year. Mundo en tus manos, she, the same person, Martina Beck's, she writes up a narrative of current events in the Spanish-speaking world. So if you're interested, there's usually different levels, so you could do the harder level with your heritage kids. It is harder sometimes because it comes through her lens, so maybe that's not ideal. It depends on your level of students, but it is good to have some some options for like nonfiction for your students. News ELA in Spanish and Common Lit in Spanish are great options, especially now. The Common Lit is free. A lot of stuff on News ELA is free, but those would be good options right now while we're hybrid because they're digital. And so is Revista Literal. So those are great options. You also can print them off and just put them like in page protectors so you can use them when we go back. Scholastic is a fantastic place to get books, especially they have Club Leo, which is all their Spanish books, but also fantastic prices and free shipping to schools. Lots of other options here. So I would check out all of these if you are desperate for funding. And to figure out like what books to read, to buy, it kind of depends on the age level. And like I said, it depends how much money you have to spend. If you have like a ton of money and you need to buy a bunch, it's a little harder. If you can buy little by little, I have lots of options here. I have a ton of options listed on my website, and also my list of classroom books are here. I have not read all of them, and they are by level. So you can scroll to the bottom and see all the books I've purchased for Heritage. But there's a ton of options in these blog posts, which are about free reading and Heritage. If you know Mike Pito, he has a fantastic blog. He has blogged about titles. There's a ton of titles listed here, CI Reading, and these two websites, TPRS Books and Fluency Matters. These are those language learner websites. So you have to be kind of careful because I have found some real severe issues with some of them where I just feel like it's really stereotypical and it's written by someone not from the culture. So I would use caution with those. But they do have some nice like upper level Spanish 4, Spanish 5 that would be perfect for your Heritage students. I highly recommend the Orca Soundings books. You can get like, I think there's like 20 of them, and you can even buy the whole package. Those are great for reluctant readers, especially for students that need high interest, but like a lower level book. And I already mentioned the Lorito books and the Squawk boxes. And sometimes you can just look at their Squawk boxes and take a list of all of them and then buy them individually. So you don't actually have to subscribe. You can use that as an inspiration to purchase titles. Remember, this isn't like, if you think about a library would never buy books like at the beginning. When they open the library, they can't just buy a bunch of books and be done. Like, you have to update it, you have to curate it, you have to get rid of the old stuff, you have to buy new stuff. And so try to have like a long-term goal or commitment. Like every year you're going to get $200 to buy, 10 new books, because you're going to want to buy books during the year. Like, you're going to have a student that loves baseball and you're going to want to get another book for him, or you're going to want to buy new books that come out. And maybe this is you, maybe just you're going to invest and buy a book a month or a book every other month. And those books are going to go to your library, knowing that if you ever change schools, you'll take them with you. So think about how you can keep it fresh, because that is the curating a good section of books for your students is your job as a librarian. And as that, just what that quote about Kim, like, we are working in community with them to reestablish their reading lives, to help them understand how deserving of literacy they are. And so we need to do our half. So in your classroom, you want to make it as fun and enticing to students. You want to make it just like a book-rich environment. So you want lots of space for books. You want to make browsing easy. So I highly recommend you set up tables and lay your books out flat instead of on bookshelves, so you can only see the spine. So think about like what a bookstore would do, where you have some are spined, but then some of them are turned. You can see their covers. Okay, you're trying to make it as accessible and fun to kids. Make sure kids know what book you're reading. I keep books on my whiteboard ledge so that I remember to talk about them every day, and I rotate, like, this is what I'm reading next, or this is a new book that came. Celebrate their success. I'll show you some Post-its, but one year I just had every kid in the class that finished a book put up Post-its. And it wasn't really a competition like this kid versus this kid, but it was really cool to see, like, this is how much we've read as a class. I have a whole set of Nooks, which are like the e-readers from Barnes & Noble. If you have those, I don't really recommend those. It seems that kids really do want print books these days. But there was a time before I knew that I wrote a grant and got them. And I ran color copies of the covers and hung them up on the walls, because without that, it just felt like, there's 40 books on here and the kids have no idea what's on there. Okay, so I'm going to share some pictures of my classroom. This is obviously pre-COVID. So I just want to point out, these are some of the covers from my electronic readers. These are quotes about why reading is so powerful. And then if you can spread them out, like, instead of having these on top of each other, I decided to spread them out so that students could browse without kind of like being on top of each other. I don't recommend these ring getters. Those were a disaster because the books all fall forward and you can't see. Plus, by the end, I had so many books that these weren't like that helpful anyways. On the slideshow, there's a link. I got these off of Bryce Hedstrom's website. Here are some of the examples of the reviews and the books that they had read, and they just wrote like what they liked about it and how many stars. But the idea is like, look, we read in this classroom. That's the goal. Here you can start to see I was experimenting with tables and laying them out, and you can start to see like, oh yeah, like that's way more enticing than like all these books packed behind each other. And even now, like I just have so many books now that I can't hardly display them all, but it's much more enticing for kids. And then projects that kids have done, redoing the covers, those get laminated and hung up. Pictures of kids, these were taken by the district the day I handed out those e-readers. They came and did like a thing. And so pictures of kids enjoying books, pictures of my kids enjoying books was important. This bookshelf was a find because it holds a ton of books, and you can see all the covers. The only thing is the kids crowd around it, so it's not actually that helpful. And just, having all kinds of levels and different titles about different things is super helpful. And then just making a really big deal when new books come in. Who wants to read the new book? I'm not going to show this video. I don't know if you can. hopefully you can still see it. This is a video of basically the pictures I was just showing you. Okay, so multiple copies are stacked together, but you'll notice I mostly just have a lot of copies of singles or doubles. Yeah, so maybe it was taken on a different day, but same setup that I have in there. And you know, it's been harder with COVID this year. We decided to have students check out books and keep them for the semester. And so it's kind of scary because they're not library books, you know, we're just like keeping track of them ourselves. And so, but I think, you know, that's been a worthwhile investment on our part. And we also requested money to replace the ones we knew we would leave, that we were going to lose. So to start this, I would start, if you can, I would start the first week of school because you want to take advantage of that honeymoon period when kids will do anything. You also, this is a hallmark of my routine. This is how we start class every day. So the sooner we start it and get in routine, it's better for everyone, including me, especially me. A really good way to start is a book tasting where you, like, each kid has a couple of books and a piece of paper and you give them like 5 minutes to thumb through the books and decide if they like them. And then they keep kind of a list of ones they want to read. And then you pass, right? So you could spend a whole class period just having kids look at books and decide. And remember, you're encouraging them, like, pick an easy book. Like, this is what I'm reading and this is what I enjoy. Then I like to make a big, like a lottery thing of like letting kids pick their books. So after everybody has their lists, I would be like, okay, hey, whatever, Juanita, you're first. And she goes up and picks like the one book everyone wants. I was like, oh, like you're trying to make some fanfare and get excited. If you have multiple classes using them, I normally don't let kids take them home. This year because of COVID, they are. But usually we would leave them in my class. So everyone in class, the books stay in there. And so each period just has a different color post-it. So period 1 is pink. So if it has a pink post-it, you can't read it because someone else in your class is reading it. But if it has a different color, you can, because that's a different period. So the first day, that takes almost the whole day, is like picking out books. And then I let them read for 10 minutes at the end. And then I'm handing out a reading log, and I have it linked here. It's nothing fancy. It just has stamps on one, like boxes for stamps on one side. And on the other side, they just write the title, the pages, and one sentence about what's happening. You're trying to keep accountability super minor. Like, it's not really about, did you do your reading log and how many pages are you reading? It's more about like, were you here? Did you read? Awesome. How's it going? You know, like, it's not meant to be punitive. So I would do all that the first day and finish with the reading log. And then the second day I would start. So as they come in, they find their book, they get their reading lab. And then when the bell rings, I walk around and stamp them. That's how we start. And then they're not allowed to write anything down while we're reading. They have to read the 10 minutes and then we write at the end. For routines and accountability, the most important thing is that you read too, which is really hard. I usually take attendance and then I read for the like 8 minutes. Trying to walk the line of like, I have to have you do a reading log. I have to know you were here, but I'm trying not to kill the joy of reading. That's really what we're trying to do. I do make it worth points. I make the reading log worth points. They get 10 points a day just for their reading log. And I just, when they turn them in, every day is 10 points. So if they were absent 4 days, then they would get like, whatever that is, you know, depending on how many, I would subtract 40 points. And I let them make it up, but they have to come make it up and read in my classroom. So maybe at lunch or something. And I just think making it part of our class routine and giving it points is a way for me to say, this matters enough to me that it matters in your grade. And like in virtual learning, when we're in Zoom, we read in Zoom. We read the first 10 minutes in Zoom. It's never something that, like, if it's that important, then I make class time for it. Let's see, I let kids quit in the middle of a book if it's too hard or they're just not into it, because that's real life. And I don't ever have like a minimum, like you have to finish this many books. And I work really hard to like match books to kids. So if a kid is like really into baseball, I might say, hey, try this one. Or if a kid is really, I'd be like, what kind of book do you like to read? Oh, biographies. Oh, have you read this one? It's so good. And that's one of the reasons it's important that you are a reader. It's important that you're reading those books, that you have that joy, that you can have those conversations. And just working to develop that culture of reading in your room. So reading when your students are reading, talking about what you're reading. And I'm going to show you this picture. This is from Jen Lopez's school. And she presents at a webinar for ACFL, the ACFL Spanish for Heritage Learners SIG. But this is Jen's door, and she has like a recently finished, and she just has the covers on her door and then what she's reading right now. And they have numbers of like how many books they've read that year, that school year. And it's really caught on in her school. So, and she has, I like this. She has like, these are ones I started reading and didn't like, abandone, which I think is cool. And you're just normalizing reading life. You're normalizing like, this is what I'm doing. And a lot of times like that can tell your students a lot about you. Do you like YA fiction? Do you like fantasy? Do you like nonfiction? So just a way to like, just normalize reading. Book talks, like I often talk about a book that I'm reading, or I have like those, like I said, the new books on the front of the chalkboard. So I'll talk about those. Or sometimes I ask students who want to do it, or if they just finished, if they want to do it. It's fun to have just a built-in, like tell your friend what you read today. We talked about the sticky notes. The idea is kind of like a book club. Like, what'd you read? You know, what would you recommend? Would you recommend I read that? What do you want to read next? Oh, I read this one. It's really good. That's what you're looking for. And just you want to read as many of your books as you can, because you want to be able to connect with kids and recommend new books. Let's see. And I wanted to share a couple additional resources. I linked a lot of resources in the slides, and these will be in the folder with the resources for you all. But these 3 books, Book Love, No More Fig Reading, and A Novel Approach, are all also helpful. I wanted to also shout out the Facebook group. I co-moderate this, I co-founded this Facebook group, which is exciting because there's probably like 3,500 Spanish heritage teachers there. But it's a great place to get ideas for books. Like, has anyone read this? Oh, I just saw this came out. And so I get most of my recent recommendations there. And I mentioned lots of blogs earlier, Mike Pito's blog, Courtney Nygaard's blog, Kristen Montgomery's blog, but Jen's blog is here, who's also fabulous. So check that out. And my blog's on the first slide. So that's really all I had for you today. I just want to say, like, free reading has been a cornerstone of my class. It's made my class a more joyful place. It's given us a chance to ground ourselves. And I would say most of my kids really enjoy it. And so, and I often don't do projects on their books or anything. It's just reading to read. And I've had a ton of success. So anyways, I just wanted to share that with you humbly today. I hope that was helpful for you. Hopefully the resources are helpful for you. Feel free to reach out again on Twitter, or my blog is on the first page with the contact form if that's easier. Yeah, and I'd love to hear your takeaways. So thanks for joining me today.